Alright, so here's a quick tutorial on how to make a semi-generative patch with the WALDORF Blofeld. So first thing to know is I'm using the free button to trigger the sustain toggle on my Blofeld keyboard. Now I know there's no such button on the Blofeld desktop, so two workarounds would be to use a sustain pedal and just like put a book on it or something, just so it keeps sustaining. Or you could send, if you have an external sequencer or your DAW, you could send continuous CC, I think it's 64, which activates the sustain of your synth. All right, so let's get started. Real quick, the sound that I have now is very simple, and it sounds like this. Very simple. There is a resonant wavetable, 8-foot, and sine wave, 16-foot on oscillator 2. That's it for oscillators. Then there's a bit of cutoff on filter 1 with a little bit of resonance. Envelope amount is 63. Filter envelope is as such, so we have 100 on the attack, 52 on decay, sustain is 8 or 9, and release is 33. Now where everything happens is here. So basically this loop envelope, so as you know there's different types of envelope. By default this is ADSR, so attack, decay, sustain, release, but there's different options here, and the option that I use is loop all. So basically if I'm gonna press notes here and I'm gonna keep pushing on notes, and you'll see what happens. So it repeats basically the notes that you input at first, it repeats them. So that's very cool, but that's not near generative. So next thing we want to do is to take a look at the LFOs. So LFO1, sample and hold, speed of 80. That's just because sample and hold is somewhat random, and that's what we want. To modulate some of the envelope parameters later on with the modulation matrix. Everything else is by default, so don't worry about that. LFO2 is a sine wave, the speed is 40, same thing, everything else is default, so don't mind that. And LFO3 is a random LFO with a speed of 10. The modulation matrix, that's where it gets interesting. Basically what we're going to try to do is add as much randomization to that amplitude envelope so that the notes don't come back at the same moment, and some notes will come back at a certain time and others won't, and that's the beauty of this patch. First thing is the LFO1. We're going to basically make a feedback so that LFO1, so the sample and hold, actually control its own speed, and that's really cool because it's basically randomizing the randomization. Modulation 2 is LFO1 controlling the amplitude envelope decay, plus 47, so LFO1 controlling amplitude decay. Modulation 3, now LFO2 controls the amplitude envelope attack. Now it sounds like this. Cool. So I'm going to activate the free button if you don't have it, the sustain pedals, and now I'm going to input some notes that are relevant somewhat to scale so that it all sounds pretty much harmonically accurate. So now what's interesting is to add more modulation. So modulation 4 is cutoff of the filter, controlled by LFO1. So every now and then the cutoff will open and close, and that will add an additional layer of timbral movement. Modulation 5 is the amplitude release, controlled by LFO1 still. LFO3 is going to control the pulse width, the wavelength of my wavetable on oscillator 1, and now LFO3 controls the sine wave speed of LFO2. And finally, that's the final one, the mod wheel is going to control the sustain, and you'll see why. So it's starting to sound pretty good, but of course something's missing, and what's missing is some delay. So here are the delay parameters. So I'm just gonna add some delay, about around 45, something like that. Length is 127, spread -64, feedback 52, polarity negative, and cutoffs 69. So now this patch is kind of alive, and what's interesting to try is change the decay time, because the loop is going to be smaller, and so things will repeat more often. Whereas if you increase the decay time, now there's more quiet times and sometimes very loud. So it's nice to keep it around 69. If you hear those noisy sounds, it's because the loop is starting to be very small sometimes, and so you want to increase the release a little bit to make sure the loop is not too fast, because it's being modulated by multiple things, and sometimes just the LFOs go crazy. All right, that's it for me. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, and please leave a comment or a thumbs up if you enjoyed the video. If you want me to do more videos like this, I could do that. I'll be happy to. Yeah, all the best, and I'll see you around.